from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media, your liberty-loving Latino amigo. Happy to be here with you this Tuesday. Many of us were off yesterday for Memorial Day. Those of you that were out there braving the holiday weather, it was nice in a lot of places, really warm weather on the East Coast. Thank you. I salute you. If you were off too, I hope you had a great time with your families and friends doing what we should be doing, right? Having barbecues, having cookouts. And if any of you guys have any good, close conspiracy friends that were saying, this year for the barbecue, you're not going to have beef, you're not going to have this, you're not going to have that. No, we had it all. It just was a little bit more expensive, or a lot of it more expensive, depending on what you were buying, because of inflation and whatnot. And, less people are getting raises. And there's a whole job situation. And we're going to get to that in a little bit in the top of the next hour with one of our favorite economists. But I want to talk a little bit about a few different things because obviously there's a criminal investigation into Senator Bob Menendez. I want to get into that as well a little bit later. I want to talk about the 2024 situation and see what's going on. But there wasn't a ton of news, right? Because, they decide what they're putting out. It's funny. Isn't it funny how, many Fridays we'll have these big news dumps and it's like, oh my gosh, earth-shattering news. Trump did this, so-and-so did that. And then, for Memorial Day weekend, everything's good. Everybody's chilling. Everybody's taking it easy. Cógelo con bien, take it easy, right? Take it really, really easy. But traditionally speaking, and again, this is not the election year, right? We're still in 2023. But after Labor Day is when people kick their campaign into full swing. So it, of course, comes with the territory that we're going to see more and more people out there on the stump, on the Sunday shows, here, there, and everywhere else, starting to take shots, explaining why things can't be done. And one of those people was Bernard Sanders. Healthcare is a right. Bernie. Bernie never met a commie he didn't love. Anyway, Bernie Sanders was on Face the Nation, and he says we cannot have 4 more years of Trump in the White House because he caused an insurrection. Listen to this.
What do you say, Senator, though, to some of your longtime supporters who are frustrated because they don't believe the Biden administration's done enough? They may not share your view of how things have gone, and they're thinking about Cornel West, or they're thinking about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. What's your message to them as they drift toward those others?
Well, my message to them is that we are living in an unprecedented moment in American history. Donald Trump is not only a pathological liar, has not only helped wage an insurrection, if you like, to prevent President Biden from taking office, not only is denying American democracy, moving against American democracy. So I think at this moment, Bob, we have got to bring the progressive community together to say, you know what, we're going to fight for a progressive agenda, but we cannot have 4 more years of Donald Trump in the White House.
So we can't have 4 more years of Donald Trump. Donald Trump caused an insurrection, according to Senator Bernard Sanders, Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders, I think, is so dead wrong here. And I'm going to explain to you why. Because he's talking about how this is an attack on American democracy. Now, in its purest sense, right, democracy is majority rule. All in favor say aye, right? It's a vote. What has Trump done to affect any vote other than to request that there's a recount or to find votes that were missing and et cetera, right? He's done nothing. He's done nothing to change the way votes are happening. If electors from certain states decided they wanted to submit an alternate slate of electors, I have no reason to believe this was done at his choosing. I believe this was done at their discretion as state legislators. So, but again, all that aside, there was no change. He made no change to anything. However, Bernie Sanders, who's an independent, and his friends in the Democrat Party have been trying to reshape, reinterpret, and redo the Constitution without actually redoing the Constitution, right? Because, again, the Constitution is not a living, breathing document, as many suggest, but it is a document that can be changed to withstand the test of time. And that's why women can vote. This is why African Americans can vote post-Civil War, right? As changes happened in our country, we made changes to the Constitution. And earlier this morning, I got an excellent piece in my email from the great one, Mark Levin, something he wrote himself, and it's on theblaze.com, and I shared it on Twitter and the rest, and Truth Social and the rest of the social media. But the headline, I won't read everything to you. I want you to read it because it's really well written. And I think few people could have put this together. And as you know, the great one, Mark Levin, he's not just a great broadcaster, but he was the chief of staff to the Attorney General of the United States, so running the Department of Justice during the Reagan administration. And he points out that the Democrat Party's fetish for the 14th Amendment is a vile attack on our elections, and it's all directed at one man, Donald Trump. And he writes a little bit, and I'll give you a little bit of it. The modern Democrat Party has an unhealthy fetish for the 14th Amendment, one of the three post-Civil War constitutional amendments. Democrats are constantly and relentlessly trying to rewrite it to accommodate their political ends. And he points out that a couple of months back, they wanted to redo Section 4, but not, again, by taking a vote and changing the Constitution, but moreover, by just reinterpreting it in a way that benefited them. And that was Nancy Pelosi saying that we have to redo the debt ceiling, and we can do it because of the 14th Amendment. And you remember Joe Biden repeating that as well, saying that they have this power, this authority. And, went to the courts, or it was going to go to the courts, and they said, we're not going to do that because obviously they're going to lose. But it had to do with the validity of the public debt of the United States. Well, fast forward to where we are now, and they're focusing on a different section of the 14th Amendment, Section 3. And Section 3 reads that no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or as an executive or judicial officer of any state to support the Constitution of the United States shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof, but Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. Right? So a vote would require anyone that meets that criteria. Now, the word that's absent from this quote from the Constitution is president. It talks about electors for the president and vice president. It talks about any of the civil offices in the military. It talks about the state office holders, state executives. So tons of people are excluded from this, except for the most important one, which is, again, a constitutionally protected role, which is President of the United States. Fascinating, right? So Levin points this out very aptly, and he does an excellent job, and it's really spelled out really well. I can't do it justice by paraphrasing. I highly recommend that you read it. But the Democrats are now saying that president fits into any of these other offices. Meanwhile, it's the only office of its kind that exists, right? And there's only two things that people vote for federally, right, where everybody votes. These aren't like senators like Menendez, for example, where only New Jersey residents can vote for them. So this has been a common theme, this misinterpretation of the laws, this misrepresentation of the laws and of crimes to make certain people, political enemies, look a certain way. This hasn't been going on forever, but it seems to be the new normal right about now. And it's something we need to be cognizant of. So we're going to continue part of that discussion as we move forward. I want to talk about 2020. I want to talk about the attack on Trump. I want to talk about all the polling data that's out there, because despite all of this crazy, Trump seems to be doing well. Biden seems to be holding on, but not doing as great. And I want to get to the bottom of the latest numbers with pollster John McLaughlin, who's scheduled to join us. He's a pollster on Donald Trump's team. So stick with me, folks. We're just getting started. We've got a brand new live show. We're live 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations. I had somebody. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right?
That's
but
right.
You're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So I want to ask you the question I asked Tim Kaine towards the end there. It is kind of shocking in a way that despite all of the baggage that Donald Trump carries, he's tied with Joe Biden right now.
Yeah, I mean, George, when I looked at that recent poll, the Wall Street Journal, I said, oh, this could keep me up at night. Look, the problem is, and the biggest challenge we face as Democrats, I say we because I'm a Democrat, is that young voters, young Black and Latino voters.
So there you have it. George Stephanopoulos is doing an interview on ABC this week, just yesterday, with Donna Brazile, or Sunday, excuse me. And Donna Brazile, former DNC chair, and she's a contributor now at ABC News. And she says the biggest problem that they're facing is that young Black and Latino voters are jumping ship from the Democrat Party. And you know why? Because they've realized this idea of working with Democrats and being blindly loyal to this party that's done nothing but continue to perpetuate whatever the status quo has been. So if there's been rampant poverty in Black and Hispanic communities, that continues. And the only time they saw a break from that was when Donald Trump was in office because of his cutbacks in red tape, his rollbacks on regulations, and annual household incomes going up. So you look at all of that and you say, wow, Donna Brazile, looks like you have a problem. An El Trompito problem, right? Donaldus Magnus, the 45th president of these United States. He's very popular amongst Hispanics. I saw this rap video, two of them actually, over the weekend, where rappers, Black and Hispanic rappers, were rapping about free El Trompito. And I was thinking, hey, where'd you get that term? But anyway, the bottom line was it's great to see the streets really representing here for something that they believe in. And last time I saw this was for Obama. So I think it's remarkable to see that they're out there for Trump. Trump is leading. I think he's up by 60 points, according to the latest Wall Street Journal poll, and saying he's the top choice for nearly 60% of Republican voters. And again, this is a poll that came out on Saturday over Labor Day weekend. So I want to bring in one of President Trump's pollsters, but he's a tremendous pollster in his own right. He always has been, John McLaughlin of McLaughlin Associates, to help us break it down. And I want to pick his brain a little bit. John McLaughlin, welcome back, sir.
That's great to be back, Rich.
You bet, brother. How was your Labor Day?
It was good. We were working over the holidays. So.
Very laborious.
Yes,
Gotcha.
Yes.
Well, let's talk about this Wall Street Journal poll because obviously, I get excited as a partisan, as an opinion commentator. I love to hear the Democrats get a little nervous there when you have Donna Brazile saying, "Well, man, black men and Hispanic men are jumping ship," and Stephanopoulos saying, "I can't believe this guy's tied with Biden," and blah blah blah. So, I mean, it's always a breath of fresh air. Albeit early in the game, I still appreciate hearing that. But what's your take on this particular poll?
Well, the Wall Street Journal poll that came out over the weekend had Biden and Trump tied among registered voters. And there's a big difference between likely voters and registered voters. Most of the polls on the average of the Real Clear Politics, virtually all of them are registered voters. And so they'll call anybody who's a registered voter. Most of the times they know who they are because you've got voter lists, you have databases. Now, we published a poll just a week before where it was completed right after the announcement of the Fulton County indictment, the fourth indictment of President Trump in 5 months. And it was right the day we completed it, the day of the Republican debate for Milwaukee. And we did 1,000, we do this every month, 1,000 likely voters, where not only do we call them if they're a registered voter, but we ask them how likely they're going to vote, because there's basically 90 million eligible voters who are out there that don't vote. We had 160 million show up in 2020 for a record, and there were still another 90 million people who were eligible that didn't vote. So the reason I'm stressing that is because we had Trump ahead 47-43. And Trump was never ahead in the national popular vote in 2016 or 2020. It was always a battleground state play among the 17 swing states, and we were hoping to have an electoral victory, which we were able to do out of 139 million that were cast in 2016. We won enough electoral votes based on 78,000 votes, 44,000 in Pennsylvania, 22,000 in Wisconsin, 10,000 in Michigan. So we won an electoral victory. And in 2020, we lost by an even closer margin of those swing states, where we lost about 11,000 votes in Georgia, 11,000 votes in Arizona, and 20,000 votes in Wisconsin. And now, both those elections, we were trailing in the national popular vote, and the national popular vote has 4 points down against Joe Biden. So in the poll that we just published, that's on our website on McLaughlinonline.com, it picks up where, in effect, it sets the stage for what this Wall Street Journal poll has said and the other polls have said, that Trump, if the election were held today, Trump would win, and it would be an electoral landslide, where not only would win those states that are close, because the battleground states in this poll, in our poll, we have Trump winning 49-41. And in the model of that poll, there's actually 4% more Biden voters from 2020 than Trump 2020 voters, and instead Trump's ahead by 4 points. So Trump has flipped it. By the way, there is, and this is what's freaking out the Democrats, they are seeing Biden 2020 voters move to undecided or move to Trump. 4% of them have actually moved to Trump, and they've left Biden. So, and
are those the black and Latino voters that Donna Brazil's talking about?
Yes, and in the black voters in the poll, we're at 21%. Trump had 8% among blacks in 2016. He got 12% in 2020, and he's got 21% in this poll. And it's not just my polls. There's other polls that they're seeing this, where black voters, and the strange part is they're getting feedback from, particularly younger black men who are saying they know Trump's record with the First Step Act. They know him, his stand in favor of drug courts to give people a chance that weren't violent criminals to get out of jail, restart their lives, et cetera. And, they see, here's this guy who went to bat for them, and when he was president, they were employed, their paychecks were more, their wealth was going up, and here's this guy being mugshot. He's being fingerprinted and mugshot, and they know it's all politics, because in our poll, 74% of all voters said that politics had a role in all these indictments. That's among all voters. 60% say Biden had a role, that right. He's been, he's trying to indict his political opponent. And so they're kind of, they're looking at this and saying, I'm going to vote for Trump. They're breaking away. They're leaving the Democrat Party because things were better under Trump. Right now, their wealth and their, people go to buy gas. They go to buy food. They're paying essentials with credit cards. So
yeah, it's a tough situation. John McLaughlin, stand by. We're going to come right back to you. Folks, we're on with John McLaughlin, pollster extraordinaire. He's with the head of the McLaughglin Group and McLaughlin Associates. They're a fantastic polling firm, and we're going to continue this conversation as to how Trump is cutting into the Democrats' edge on black and Hispanic voters. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We're on with John McLaughlin from McLaughglin Associates. He's a pollster to President Trump. He's been a pollster for a long time, and we're discussing a number of different polls that are out there. We just talked about the Wall Street Journal poll, but I want to shift gears quickly and go to a CNN poll that came out today, and it says GOP voters still maintain broad support for Trump. The lead holds, with less than half of them seriously worried about criminal charges harming his 2024 chances. Again, that's a CNN poll that brought that up. They conducted that with SSRS. So I find that pretty interesting. 52% of Republicans and Republican-leaning independent voters support Trump, compared with 18% that are supporting the next popular Republican, Governor Ron DeSantis. And I think this is very notable, right? Only one of these guys has been indicted 4 times and is constantly being told that we can't have him. He's a threat to democracy. He's this, that, and the third. And it just, for me, it's great to see how the Trump campaign is creeping into some of the Democrat enclaves and peeling off some support. John McLaughlin, what do you think of this CNN poll?
Well, I think their analysis, because of their point of view, that they come across, and they're like, oh, he's indicted, and his support's going up. Of course it's going up, because everyone sees his indictments as political. Not everyone, but the vast majority of voters, 74%, as I said in our poll, say it's political. 60% think Biden played a role in these indictments. That's among all voters. When you ask the voters, are these indictments just to stop Trump to run for president? In our monthly poll, August 23rd, 49 to 38, they said it is. Republican primary voters, 74 to 12. Is this a diversion away from Hunter Biden and his scandals and the cocaine in the White House? Among all voters, they say it's a diversion, 55 to 34. Among Republican primary voters, it's 83 to 10. Is there a double standard of justice that they cut a sweetheart deal with Hunter Biden and while at the same time persecuting President Trump? Among all voters, they agree that there's a double standard of justice, 59-29. Republican primary voters agree 88 to 14. And then when we ask a question saying, should the voters decide on the ballot who's going to be the next president, or should we, or should it be Biden and the courts? 56 to 34, the majority of voters want to decide. Republican primary voters, it's 85 to 10. So what you've got here is a point of view where Republicans are incensed that their leading candidate for president, who's beating Joe Biden in most of the credible polls, not just mine, but a lot of these, you mentioned the Wall Street Journal's tied. There's other polls out there that have Trump ahead, and they want to beat Joe Biden. And here's Joe Biden using his political allies in the Manhattan DA's office, in Fulton County with Fani Willis, who's a Soros-supported beer, and you've got Jack Smith, who Merrick Garland appointed the Attorney General after the pressure from Joe Biden, the president, who said to him he needed, and this has been reported in the New York Times more than once, where he wanted them stop acting like a ponderous judge and basically indict Trump. So here's Joe Biden, the most corrupt president in the history of the country, because it's alleged he's taken not just millions, but tens of millions of dollars in bribes from overseas countries, a good bit of which while he was vice president, and multiple family members involved in this. Here's this most corrupt president, who's also a failed president, because 67% of the voters say the country's on the wrong track. The economy's getting worse, not better, 64 to 32. 83% have been negatively impacted by inflation, 45% to the point where they can't make ends meet. And, he's gotten so desperate that the only thing he can do to stop his opponent is to indict him, is to weaponize the whole law enforcement system with the DOJ, the FBI, the IRS, et cetera. And if he could do that to Donald Trump, he could do that to any political opponent, or he could do it to any American. So voters are getting this. And Donald Trump is going up in the polls, because when you look at the momentum, in January, in a field of a dozen candidates, Trump was ahead 43 to 31 for DeSantis, everybody else single digits. Now it's 51% in our poll. And like you said, the Wall Street Journal poll is 59. And DeSantis has collapsed to 9% in our poll. And one-on-one, Trump was beating DeSantis in January 52 to 40. It's now 72 to 28 in our poll. So that Trump, there's no undecideds. Trump would beat DeSantis. There's no place for him to go. There's no message. There's no oxygen left in the room. And they had a Republican debate in Milwaukee, and here's Fox News and Fox News and the RNC trying to embarrass Trump into going on debates. Well, the next day he has to go get his mugshot taken, his fingerprints taken, because Fani Willis is indicting him. And it's all politics. And the voters get it. The voters were probably like, why aren't the other Republicans standing up for Donald Trump? I mean, one guy said he'd pardon Donald Trump. The Republican voters don't think he did anything wrong. I mean, these ridiculous laws that they're indicting him under. I mean, one has a 20-year prison term. It's from 1870. Another one has the death penalty. And it's like these laws were used against Civil War generals. It's like it's just, for the wrong side. It was like this is just really it's outrageous. It's unprecedented in American history. And the networks haven't turned on the Biden corruption. They've not turned against Joe Biden. But when they do, he's going to have a hard time because the charges against him have, the House has proven he's taken millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars gone into his family from foreign interests, whether it's Ukraine and Burisma or whether it's China. I mean, they're going to keep
laundered
going after
through
that.
20 shell corporations.
Yeah, right. And he's got all these emails. He's got fake emails
and fake names.
With fake names. So it's like organized crime kind of. And here's Trump, who didn't do anything wrong, and they're doing acrobatics to indict him to stop him from beating Joe Biden. And the bad part is, that the Republicans, have to. Our resources are going to lawyers to pay lawyers to keep our candidate out of jail because they're trying to make him the Nelson Mandela of America, which is unbelievable what Joe Biden's doing. I mean, it's like people are outraged by it. So the voters, you got to give the voters credit. To seeing through this, Trump's ahead in the polls. Trump's got all the momentum in the Republican primary, and. If the other candidates, the sad part is if the other candidates, if they were ahead of Biden or if they were moving up in the polls, my guess is, Biden would indict them too. But right now, Trump's his target. So.
Folks, we're on with John McLaughlin, the head of McLaughglin Associates, and he's a pollster to President Trump. We're discussing a number of polls, some that he's conducted, others that we're seeing. One of the ones I'm looking at is from CNN. And right in line with what you're talking about, John McLaughlin, 52% of Republicans and Republican-leaning independent voters support Trump, compared with 18% that are behind Governor Ron DeSantis. Trump is seen broadly as the best able to handle a wide range of issues. And again, this is conducted by CNN and SSRS, so not a favorable outlet, to say the least, but yet still the numbers a jibe with everything we're seeing in all of the polls thus far. And I want you to stick with me. I want to get an idea of your sense on the issues. I know people, we talk about the candidates and which candidate people are with, but I'd like to know what, your sense is on which issues are really burning in the minds of Americans as we head into the 2024 election cycle. So, folks, stick with us. We're on with John McLaughlin, pollster for Trump 2024, and me, Rich Valdez. We're coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We're on with John McLaughlin. He is a pollster to Trump 2024. He's advising the campaign with his mysterious, magical arts in polling. John McLaughlin, let's talk about the issues. What are the top issues that voters are facing? What's the most pressing from your view?
Well, most voters are concerned about the economy. There's roughly half the voters are concerned about the economy. They with inflation being the number one issue that's cited. And, ironically for Biden, he's out there on this Bidenomics tour. In our last poll, we asked whether people are favorable or unfavorable to Bidenomics, and only 22% were favorable. 46% were unfavorable. Only 34% thought Bidenomics did anything good for the country. 49% said it was bad for the country. because it's inflation. Like I said to you, 83% of all voters say they've been negatively impacted by inflation, 45% to the point where they're having trouble making ends meet. So the number one issue is absolute inflation, where they wake up in the morning, if you have to go to work and get gas, you're paying $4 or $5 a gallon, which is more than the $2 and change that you were paying when Trump was president. And if you have to go buy food, which everybody does sooner or later, you're paying more for less. And a lot of people have had to cut back, whether it was, you can't have a steak at night, or you're going to have to, get by. Sometimes people are making a choice between gas, food, or necessities for their kids. Plus, your electric bills are going up. They're telling you can't have certain electric fans. You're going to have to, you can't have natural gas hookups, and that's a clean energy compared to other energy. It's dropped the amount of carbon in the air and all that. It's crazy. And and so you've got a situation where these voters that are upset about the economy and inflation, they're voting for Trump. There's also, there's about 30% care about social issues like climate change and health care and education, et cetera. And they're voting for Biden 2-1, but they're only 30% of the electorate. And you've got the rest, the other quarter, are saying it's security issues, whether it's the border, whether it's crime, whether it's national security, and they're voting for Trump 5-3. So Trump's winning on a combination of economic issues and security issues, and Biden's still pushing a liberal social issue agenda, where they're basically trying to take control of your life, where everything from they're going to ban if you have a gas powered car or electric or car or truck or SUV by 2032, they want to ban those so that you can only buy electric cars, and that just doesn't work for most Americans. So only 7%. It's when we ask people, should the government decide, or we published this in April, should the government decide or the consumers decide whether to buy an electric car or a gas-powered car, truck, or
how do they respond to that?
86-8. They said the consumer should be in charge, not the government. And
is that likely voters as well?
Yes, likely voters. So, people want to decide for themselves. They don't want to be told by the government what they have to have, what they're doing. And people will make good choices. I mean, people will, they will decide what they can afford, what they can't, but they don't want to have their lives, whether it's their utility bills, made more expensive. Just think about people up north, the Northeast, people, parts of the country that get cold. When they start ordering oil, it's going to go up again for this fall. I mean, for the winter, if you have a cold winter, there's people that they're just going to have to go without other essentials because they're going to have to heat their homes. And Americans aren't used to this because while Donald Trump was president, the country was growing, the economy was booming, and even after COVID, after the shutdown of COVID, we had optimism. We were coming out of COVID. People that had taken the vaccines voluntarily, et cetera, they were optimistic. And then Biden became president, and all of a sudden it was economic pessimism. And you're also worried about national security because Trump's actually been leading Biden in the popular vote ever since Biden surrendered Afghanistan 2 years ago. In September 2 years ago, he wanted to be out before 9/11, and he just abandoned. Surrender is the word. He really surrendered Afghanistan to our enemies, terrorist enemies, and China and Russia have made the most of it, particularly Russia, because that was a signal to the Russians that you can go into Ukraine and Biden can't stop you. And you've had war there for a year and a half now, and this didn't happen when Donald Trump was president. That's for sure.
Yeah, 100%. Folks, we're on with John McLaughlin, breaking it down for us. And John McLaughlin, let everybody know where they can take a look at the surveys that you're conducting if they're interested in following you. How do they do that?
Well, most surveys we do aren't published, but we do publish like a monthly national survey, and that's on our website. Plus, if our clients release surveys, we put them on our website on McLaughlinonline.com. McLaughlinonline.com. They can find the surveys there, and I mean, everything I've cited here on this call is published on that website.
Fantastic. Folks, give him a follow on social media. Keep up to speed with what he's doing. John McLaughlin, you're a gentleman, a patriot, and a scholar when it comes to this polling stuff. You're the man with it. I appreciate you staying up late with us. Well,
Rich, keep getting out the truth and the facts, and you can trust the American people to make the right decision. Hopefully.
Amen to that.
As long as we're not being censored, or as long as they tell us the truth about what's going on with the corruption in Washington, people will know, and they'll know what to do. So we'll make the right decision. So right now, Donald Trump has all the momentum, and we've got to keep it going.
Amen to that. All right, folks. John, thank you, brother. Godspeed. And we're coming right back with your calls and more. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, we continue our discussion on all of the hot topics of the night, of the evening, that were hot during the day and getting hotter at night. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Let's go to WGDJ, Saratoga, New York, and check in with Jane. Hey, Jane, you're on with Rich Valdez.
Hey.
Welcome.
Hey, Rich, how you doing?
Wonderful.
Yeah, Mr. McLaughlin, that's very interesting. First of all, if you're going to compare Biden to the mafia, you don't want to insult the mafia that way. What I would like to know is how can we be sure, with all the illegals that are flooding in, how can we be sure we're going to have good numbers and have an honest vote when we do vote? Is how can we take care of that and make sure that it's not going to just landslide against us?
The answer is you really can't, right? I mean, because I think you have to take into account how that's always worked in the past, and that's always been a thing in the past, right? Something I've followed for many years is vote buying, and it's very popular in Texas, and there are a group of older Hispanic women that many suspect work for the cartels that work in the border towns down there, like McAllen, Texas, and Brownsville and stuff, along the border there. And they go by the street name of politiqueras. And the politiqueras have been investigated and arrested by the FBI for selling votes. And what they do is they either find dead people or living people, and they steal their mail. And they work in concert with corrupt members of the Postal Service, where they can try and get the votes ahead of time instead of being delivered to their house. They'll try and get a mail-in ballot, and then they control that vote and have someone go and vote in the name of this legally registered person. Now, some municipalities like New York City, and I'm sure it's not the first, to suggest that we should allow people to vote in non-federal elections because, parents that have their kids in a school district should have a right to vote in a school board election, even if they're not citizens, right? And they make this case. And the problem is that once you start letting anybody vote that may not be eligible to vote, but making the caveat, but it's a local election, it's okay, ultimately you open the door for fraud. So is there an issue? Yes. How do we fix it? We have to stem the tide of illegal immigration, and we need every last person that believes in election integrity to show up and volunteer on Election Day because, faith without works is dead, right? Jane, thank you for the call. Big shout out to WGDJ. Folks, straight ahead, we're going to talk about the jobs report came out just a few days ago, and we're going to get to the bottom of it with E.J. Antoni from the Heritage Foundation. Don't go anywhere.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. And there's a bunch of interesting stories out there. The economy globally is in interesting position. And one story in particular kind of stuck out at me. Authorities found a record-breaking 9.5 tons of cocaine in a banana shipment meant to go to 30 different drug rings. And this was in Spain. Spanish authorities found a record-breaking 9.5 tons of cocaine coming from Ecuador that was meant to go to 30 European drug rings. The large shipment was discovered on last Wednesday, in a refrigerated banana container in the southern port of I don't know even how to say that word. But yes, that's where they found it, in Spain. Algeciras is what it says here. And it's interesting because the big banana industry in Ecuador is now being threatened by the cartels. They're losing a ton of money because they're mainly using these banana shipments to transport drugs. Go figure. And, you know, this comes as no surprise, right? You've also got the economy in the United States, more locally. Biden's out there, just like he was a couple of weeks ago, saying, you know, they made fun of my Bidenomics, and it's working, right? He starts his little weird, creepy whispering thing, and saying that Bidenomics is working, and a new jobs report is out. You know, again, there's mixed emotion on that. Biden's touting the jobs report while most Americans are still living paycheck to paycheck. And I want to dig into that story a little bit before we get into some other stuff. I also want to talk a little bit about the BRICS coalition that is seemingly gaining steam, but we'll get to that in a moment. But with respect to Biden and the jobs report, he spoke on it just before Labor Day weekend. I want you to hear what he has to say.
As we head into Labor Day, we ought to take a step back and take note of the fact that America is now one of the strongest job-creating periods in our history, in the history of our country. We've added 13.5 million jobs since I took office, around 800,000 of them manufacturing jobs. We created more jobs in 2 years than any president ever created in a single four-year term. We did it in 2 years.
So there he is. He's thrilled to pieces. Again, he's whispering, it's working. We did it in 2 years and 4 years and 4 years and 2 years. Listen, I'm no expert on the economy. I'm only an expert on how much money I take home. And I know that you and me and many of us are not in the same position that we were before. I know that I think 69 or 67% of Americans saying they were better off 4 years ago than they are now. They're worse off now. And that's not a good look when you're talking about the economy. Well, E.J. Antoni is one of our favorite economists on this program, research fellow at the Heritage Foundation, and he's with us to break down the Biden jobs report. E.J. Antoni, welcome back.
Well, Rich, thanks for having me back.
You bet. I'm here either way. You're the one that's got to drink a little coffee and stay up late with us, so we appreciate it. So let's talk about, you heard the president speaking about the jobs report, and again, like any good politician, he's going to tout everything he can and spin it the best way possible. But when he talks about adding 187,000 new jobs, is this the number that they were looking for? Did it surpass the expectation? Are we falling short? What's the skinny on this?
Well, you have to remember that although the 187,000 jobs that were added was basically in line with expectations, number one, the expectations were low. We are still far, far below our pre-pandemic trend for jobs. So in other words, we're still not back to normal, to where we should be. But on top of that, if you look at the previous 2 months, those reports were revised down yet again, which is, again, a really troubling trend because every single month this year has been revised down. We're to the point, I mean, this is just so statistically bizarre. Not only has every month been revised down, but by large margins. On top of that, there was a benchmark revision done by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is normal, but it was also revised down in a big way. So you put together all these downward revisions, Rich, and you basically have eliminated 30% of the jobs that we thought we gained. Just looking at the last 2 months that were revised downward, that knocked off 110,000 jobs right there. So in other words, wow. 59% about of the jobs that were quote unquote gained in August were just jobs we thought we already had. That's not a robust economy. That's not a healthy labor market.
And again, I just want to clarify, these are revisions that were made after the fact. So like me saying, hey guys, I lost 40 pounds. And then 2 months later I come and go, well, I had to revise those 40 pounds. I really only lost 8, or something like that. That's what you're talking about.
Right, but imagine if you call up all your friends one day and you say, oh my gosh, like let's say every Friday you send out to your buddies how much weight you've lost that week, right? I know this is a little silly, but just work with me for a second here.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
And you tell all your friends, hey, look, this is how much weight I lost 5 pounds this week. The next week, hey, I lost 4 pounds. The next week, hey, I lost another 5 pounds. But then all of a sudden you realize that something was wrong with your scale. Maybe the batteries were low. I don't know. But for whatever reason, your scale was measuring wrong. And you go back and you realize, oh, shoot, the weight I lost was only 1 pound or 2 pounds, maybe another 2 pounds. Except what do? You don't go and call up all your friends and say, oh, by the way, guys, I didn't lose anywhere near as much as I thought I did. You just reset the scale, and now you hop on it the next week and you say, okay, here's how much I lost. But you're not announcing those corrections after the fact. So what's happening with these jobs numbers is it looks like there's a really good jobs report, and that gets all the media attention. But then nobody wants to talk about the following month how the old number is getting revised down. I mean, this is big. This amounts to 661,000 jobs that we thought we had added this year that we simply haven't.
Unbelievable. And I think this is clearly problematic. How is this just solely a problem of the media not being as curious as they ought to be, being complicit with this cover-up? Because to me it seems like, I think they knew this, right, going into this, saying, oh, it's this robust number, and then, oh, well, on second look, it's really not what we thought. We saw this also with the policy called the Inflation Reduction Act, where after the fact they said this is, should have better been labeled, a Green New Deal Act, because this is one of the best pieces of legislation to support the Green New Deal ever. Kind of just totally running away from the idea that it was designed to reduce inflation, which it wasn't, right? The whole thing was a ruse and a sham, and I feel like that's the type of political sleight of hand that we see coming out of Washington time and again. Am I just being overly suspicious, or do you think we're onto something here?
No, there is something seriously wrong, Rich, with the statistical modeling going on at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. To put it in perspective, this many consistent downward revisions in the data of such a large amount or volume, whatever you want to call it, is the odds of this happening are so small that statistically speaking, they're negligible. In other words, if I were to ask you, let's say we're in a statistics class, and the question was, what is the probability of this happening? The mathematical answer to that would be 0, because it's so small, it's so remote, it is literally written off in statistics. So the idea that somehow everything is okay here and this is all perfectly normal, it's not. There is something seriously wrong with the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Folks, we're on with E.J. Antoni. He is an economist and research fellow at the Heritage Foundation. We're discussing the jobs report and these fake, phony, fraud adjustments to the previous numbers that don't put us in a great place, and setting the bar extremely low to say that, we're meeting expectation. And I want to discuss that. We'll continue that conversation. I also want to jump into a little bit about the threat or opportunity that exists with the BRICS alliance continuing to bang the pots and pans and make some noise, bringing potential 20 new or a total of 20 nations into their consortium. I'd love to get your thoughts on that, E.J. Antoni, as well. Plus your calls and more if you want to join the conversation. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Mr. Call Screener, who is a budding radio star, by the way. Richie Valdez is terrific.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
More than 20 countries from around the world have formally applied to join BRICS, and several others have expressed an interest in becoming part of the BRICS family. South Africa supports the expansion of the membership of BRICS. The value of BRICS extends beyond the interests of its current members.
That is Cyril Ramaphosa. He's president of the BRICS Alliance. He's the chairperson there. He's president of South Africa as well. And it's interesting to see the growth, right? There's always going to be competition in the monetary marketplace, and they're trying to create this alternative currency to replace the United States reserve currency. And I often wonder about this, because you get some people that are on the side of, BRICS is going to destroy America, it's going to destroy the dollar, it's going to collapse our economy. You have others saying that this just creates healthy competition, it's going to get us, get us into gear. You've got others saying, no, the United States is secretly involved in this, and this is a good thing for America. I hear all sorts of crazy. So I want to get to the bottom of this and the most current take on it with our guest. He's economist and research fellow at the Heritage Foundation E.J. Antoni, welcome back. What's your thought when you hear this message a week ago from the president of South Africa?
Oh, my goodness, Rich. We did this to ourselves, unfortunately. The Biden administration, well, let me put it this way. If they were intentionally trying to destroy the dollar, I'm not sure what they would do differently. They have seriously eroded its purchasing power here at home. It's down literally 17% in just a couple of years here. And then abroad, in addition to the problems at home, abroad we are destroying the reserve currency status by playing political games with the dollar, by threatening its apolitical nature. And as a result of that, people are less confident in the dollar. I don't care where you stand on the war in the Ukraine. At the end of the day, it was a very, very bad move for the U.S. to confiscate dollar reserves that were owned by the Russian people and the Russian central bank. That was an absolutely stupid move. The morality of it aside, whether you think we had a right to do it or not, I don't care. It was a stupid move, because what it did was it, for the first time ever, eliminated the dollar's apolitical status around the world. This is something we didn't even do to the Soviets during the height of the Cold War. And as a result of that, you have countries around the world who are now wondering when the Biden administration is going to impose the same sanction on them. There are countries in Eastern Europe, for example, that have a lot of pro-life laws, and the Biden administration calls those an assault on women and is demanding that those laws be repealed. And so those governments are wondering, are our dollar reserves at risk? You have countries in Africa who have put anti-sodomy laws on the books, and they're wondering the same thing, because the Biden administration says that such laws are an assault on the LGBTQAA plus ampersand pound sign, the alphabet soup community. And so now they're wondering, are our dollar reserves also at risk? Because the Biden administration is already talking about imposing sanctions on those countries. You can go down the line, whether it's the green energy agenda or whatever other liberal pet project you want to talk about. If you are not in lockstep with the Biden administration, you have to be fearful of your dollar reserves. And so what I'm trying to say is that all of this comes together in the eyes of foreigners to make them wonder, is the dollar safe anymore? Is it a safe place for me to store value? And the answer for many of them is no. And that's absolutely devastating for us, because the reserve currency status is the mechanism by which we have exported inflation for 70 years. If we lose the reserve currency status of the dollar, that means 70 years worth of trade deficits all come home, and they do so very quickly. That is hyperinflation. That's not an exaggeration. It's not hyperbole. That's what would happen. Imagine 70 years worth of trade deficits and budget deficits all coming back here. That's a lot of money.
So now, again, let me just set the stage for you, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. You know, I go to my family has a farm out in Pennsylvania, and I'm there and I'm talking with, some family members, and they're saying, no, because the BRICS thing is good. These are good countries that are trying to, the U.S. is secretly involved. And I'm thinking, this is absolutely crazy. There's no way collapsing the dollar is a good thing. But many people have attached themselves to the idea that the BRICS reserve currency will be attached to some sort of precious metal. They believe gold. And that since the dollar is fiat currency, that this is the only way to destroy fiat currency and bring us back to a gold standard. I think it's, straight up sipping the Kool-Aid of foreign propagandists. But I could be wrong. What's your response to someone that thinks that way?
Well, I think there's actually a lot of truth to that, believe it or not. Fiat currencies are basically a way for the government to secretly, silently, and subtly siphon wealth away from the citizenry to itself. To put in perspective just how much inflation is costing the average American, Rich, I couldn't believe this when I ran the numbers, but after double and triple checking it, it's true. Last month, the average American worker was paying more through the hidden tax of inflation on his hourly wages than he was in federal income taxes. In other words, inflation today has literally doubled the amount of money you're having to pay to the federal government in your income tax. I mean, that's astonishing. But that's why so many people, you ask them today how they're doing financially, and they tell you that they are much worse off than they were just 2 or 3 years ago. That's why, because all of that wealth is getting siphoned away from them. But there's no line item on your pay stub that says this is how much you're paying in the inflation tax, but it is there in a very, very real way. And what happens when you back a currency with a precious metal, or frankly any commodity, but precious metals have just shown throughout history to work very well at this.
Right,
like when the dollar had a gold standard, it basically lost no value until 1913 when we created the Federal Reserve. And then from then until today, the dollar has lost 98% of its value. So you tell me, what would you rather have?
Well, I would rather have a dollar that's attached to a gold standard, not the BRICS currency that's attached to a gold standard. I think America should be leading, and that's why I take exception when we're having these conversations. And I think it just seems like a road to an unhappy place where we BRICS is the new reserve currency. But we continue this discussion the next time we have E.J. Antoni on, because he knows this stuff better than you and me both. Folks, we're coming right back. E.J. Antoni, I want to thank you for being with us. You're a patriot, a gentleman, and a scholar.
No, thank you for having me.
You bet. Folks, don't go anywhere. Coming right back. Rich Valdez, 833-4-VALDEZ.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. It's Rich Valdez, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media if you want to chime in that way. Our phone number is 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And there has been several things that are happening all over the country, but one of the things that we've kept our finger on the pulse of has been the proliferation of moms that are separating from lots of different entities and joining together like Voltron, which is an old TV show, and coming together as one to fight for liberty. And you've got groups out there like Moms for America, Moms for Liberty, and so many others. And they're continuing to organize all over the place. And you've got two assemblymen in New Jersey that recently announced the Moms for Liberty coalition of candidates that are running for statewide office. And I also want to touch on this. I also want to touch on the latest into the criminal investigation into United States Senator Bob Menendez, because Senator Menendez was under criminal investigation a while back, and then all of a sudden he wasn't, and his doctor friend, Solomon Melgen, ended up going to jail. But now there's a new investigation. This is not the one from a few years back, where Senator Menendez is under investigation again. So the Department of Justice is weighing what type of charges, if any, they're going to, put against Senator Menendez following the criminal probe into gifts to his wife, is apparently what is going on here. This is being reported by the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Fox News, and others. So I want to get into this story and then pivot to the other story about the activists and the Moms for Liberty coalition of candidates in New Jersey. But being that Senator Menendez is the senator representing New Jersey, I felt it would only be appropriate to bring in a critic of his who is a state legislator in New Jersey, Assemblyman Bob Auth. Welcome, sir.
Well, good evening, Rich. Congratulations on the new show and your great success.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. And I know there's few that know what's going on with this criminal probe into Senator Menendez than you, because I know you follow this stuff and you do a great job for your constituents. So let's dive in. I know the Department of Justice is weighing potential charges against US Senator Bob Menendez, coming from New Jersey, a Democrat from New Jersey, after several years of looking into his dealings with foreign regulators. Now, one of the things that they talked about was a deal he cut with some meat distributors that distributed halal meat and others. And maybe you could walk us through this a little bit.
Well, yes. I mean, Senator Menendez is no stranger to federal investigations. Let's start by saying that. In 2013, he was being investigated for renting a property over a fair market value that was being paid for by federal government grants to an organization. So that was his first thing. And he skated through that. Then in 2015, you did mention that he had some problems with his friend Dr. McLaughlin. He was taking flights on private jets and 3-night stays in 5-star hotels in Paris and $700,000 in political contributions for him and the Democratic Party. But for all of that, Solomon Melgen got like $8 million worth of money from Medicare and Medicaid because he was using certain eye drops more than was allowed by the FDA, and so he was cheating the government. And Bob was okay with it, I guess. So he wound up going to court. The case wound up being a mistrial, and then the prosecutors at that point decided not to retry him. However, this case is a little bit over the top. He has a problem right now with the Southern District of New York because of gifts that were being given to either him or his wife. Mercedes-Benz, a high-end apartment in Washington, D.C., tens of thousands of dollars in cash and jewelry. This has caught the eye of the prosecutors, and they're going after him for that. But there is other issues involved here, too. He has gotten himself involved in the Gold Coast of New Jersey that runs from, I would say, Edgewater all the way up to Fort Lee, and some of his friends who are in the construction business have run into problems, and he's mixed up with that now, too. And that's causing him more grief than I guess he was bargaining for.
So how is he involved in this? Is it a real estate thing? I know there's several things they're looking at with what you're talking about with the waterfront properties in New Jersey.
Yes. So there's a gentleman named Fred Davies. He's a contractor. He used to own a Mariners Bank. He had been charged with doing some creative bookkeeping getting loans from the bank that he owned. He then winds up getting in over his head for a piece of a super fund property that he bought that he wanted to put a huge complex on. They capped the property rather than actually excavating the contaminated soil to remediate the property properly. And so they capped the property, and he was getting ready to build, and it started to stall. He wound up selling 25% of his interest in that property to a sheik from Quayar, who now they're looking at that particular deal as being slightly suspicious. They're not exactly sure how that transpired, so they're looking into that. But this is the problem now. They're investigating this. They've subpoenaed Mayor Sacco from North Bergen, who was part of a piece of legislation that was to prevent overdevelopment of that area, and that bill has sat there idling in the legislature for maybe 5 or 6 years now. No movement on it, and it's rather unusual because when you have a majority legislature as Democrats, and Senator Sacco was a Democrat, I believe Senator Stack was also on that bill as a prime sponsor, and the bill doesn't move. It's kind of odd because they're in power; they can make things move. Now, they said in their defense that some of the unions were complaining about the bill, so they were the ones who stalled it, lobbyists for the union workers, 825, I believe. So there's a lot of things going on here right now, but apparently Senator Menendez has his finger on the scale in that particular situation as well.
Sounds like a lot. So, folks, we're on with New Jersey Assemblyman Robert Auth. Bob Auth is keeping his finger on the pulse on what's going on in the criminal investigation into Bob Menendez. And I appreciate it. This is an update you had initially told us about when this was launched. And I think it's a very underreported story, to say the least. So we're going to continue tugging at that thread. And I also want to get your take on the state of affairs with candidates. I know there's some activism going on, and the Moms for Liberty slate of candidates was recently announced with you at the helm of it, helping them out. So I want to get into that as well. Plus your calls, folks, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. It's Rich Valdez. Our guest is New Jersey State Assemblyman Bob Auth, A-U-T-H. And Bob, Mr. Assemblyman, Governor Murphy's recently refused to accept New York City migrants after vowing to make New Jersey a sanctuary state. And I think this is funny because you've got all these overflow of immigrants, illegal immigrants that are taking over New York City. You've got Mayor Eric Adams that is up in arms. He's waving the white flag. He's saying, yeah, basta. He can't handle it anymore. And now Phil Murphy's saying, we're not doing it here. We're not going to let you use the Atlantic City Airport. We're not going to allow any of this stuff. And no thank you to the Biden administration who's suggesting what it is. I have a quote from him. He says, I don't see any scenario. This is Governor Phil Murphy in New Jersey. I don't see any scenario where we're going to be able to take in a program in Atlantic City or, frankly, elsewhere in the state. And that's Murphy on News 12 just last week, right before the weekend. And He already says we're already seeing folks in New Jersey that have probably swelled into Jersey from New York or other locations, but you need scale and an enormous amount of federal support, resources that go beyond anything we can afford. Putting everything else aside, I just don't see it. I would suspect that it'll continue to be the case. Murphy's comments are remarkable in that he's given now this about face about illegal immigration. Back in 2017, he was all for it, saying we're a sanctuary state. So, Assemblyman Bob Auth, I want to say, look, kudos to Governor Murphy for standing up for New Jerseyans. But, I guess if you're a Democrat, shame on him for not keeping it real with the illegal immigrants. What say you, Mr. Assemblyman?
I think he's running for president. and he's saying it's very unpopular right now, so he's doing some serious backpedaling. I saw that same interview that you're referring to. And I was pretty shocked to hear that, too, considering he declared New Jersey as a sanctuary state. And the interesting thing is I'm surprised the governor from Texas didn't say, well, okay, we'll send some buses up to you, too. He was sending them up to Martha's Vineyard and to New York City to Mayor Adams. But so far, I guess Governor Murphy has been unscathed. Now, whether or not he went in and did some quiet negotiating with the Biden administration, I do not know. But they have put a ground zero on the Atlantic City airport and in that area, and that remains to be seen. We haven't seen any buses come in yet, but we don't know.
What do you think he should do? Do you think he should stick to his guns as he's announcing here? Do you think there should be some sort of meet-in-the-middle approach? What's your thought?
Well, hey, everybody feels empathy for someone who's seeking asylum for legitimate reasons. But right now, New Jersey's economy is not that strong. We have people that are suffering from about a 25% inflation rate that it's killing them every time they go to the supermarket, every time they go to the gas pump. Jobs are out there. People are working, but they have to work additional jobs just to cover the cost of the inflation. It's that extra tax that people don't see on a ledger, but they see it coming out of their wallet. I think it would be totally inappropriate for us to do that right now in New Jersey. It's incumbent upon the governor, the executive branch, and the legislature to say, hey, we have to take care of the people that are here currently, the people that are here legally, even the people that are here with green cards. I mean, they're here legally. We have a lot of people in New Jersey like that. Those people come first before we say, hey, we're going to take care of people that are just running through the border unabated by border security, no checks, no investigation of any possible diseases or anything like that, and any nefarious reasons for crossing the border. We have no idea. We don't need that in New Jersey right now.
100%. And I want to shift gears with you quickly to this announcement of candidates on the Moms for Liberty ticket. Tell us what's going on.
Let me tell you, I think the mothers in New Jersey are a force to be reckoned with. I think it's really a serious overreach on part of the Democratic legislature to think that they can go in and tell parents how their kids are going to be handled if they have these transitioning issues, that they're going to be left out of the picture, that they're not going to be told about it, that they will sneak hormone treatments to the child without the parents' knowledge. All of these things, I mean, totally outrageous. Tomorrow, I believe that there's going to be a huge turnout of parents down at the State Board of Education meeting in Trenton. They're going to meet in mass to let that group know firsthand that they want a repeal of the laws that they just passed, that the governor sanctioned, and that Matt Platkin is suing. He's suing 3 towns in New Jersey because they're not abiding by the edict from the governor's office, which is to not let parents know if their children are having issues with their sexuality. It's insane. And that's going to come back and bite them. There are about 5 cohorts in New Jersey right now that feel aggrieved. Moms are one of them, but there are parents also who are upset about mandatory vaccinations. You know, of course, that Rutgers is not letting students into their college unless they're vaccinated for COVID. This is an outrage.
Let's talk about that on the other side of the break. Folks, we're on with New Jersey State Assemblyman Bob Auth discussing everything under the sun that's going on in New Jersey, and there's quite a lot of it going on, and I think it's similar to what you're facing in other blue bastions across the country. Stick with us. We're coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
My hands across America to the liberty-loving Latino, Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. It's Rich Valdez and our guest, New Jersey State Assemblyman Bob Auth. And Bob Auth, we just talked about Governor Phil Murphy potentially throwing his hat into the ring for President of the United States. What's your overall thought on 2024, that included?
I don't think President Biden will run again. He may want to, but the polls are going to be so bad for him that the party will determine that he's not a viable candidate, and they'll replace him with somebody else. And they'll let the convention process do that.
Any thoughts on who it might be?
Gavin Newsom, of course, is in there. I think Governor Murphy, believe it or not, even in polls in New Jersey, show him as being a likability. He's like at 57% likability, believe it or not. It was crazy. I saw that recently. But what he has that most of the Democrat candidates don't have, he's a Goldman Sachs guy. He's a capitalist. He's not a socialist or a communist or whatever these guys are, most of them. So he has a certain legitimacy in and amongst the regular rank-and-file Democrat. It's somebody that they could relate to a degree. Additionally, he's given some of the progressive issues to the progressives that they wanted, probably not enough, but they'll take him rather than somebody who can't win or somebody who would lose to Trump. And I think that in reality, while people don't look at him, he could be the sleeper and sneak through and run right through the middle and wind up being their candidate. I really do. I think he has the potential.
Well, let's see what happens. Folks, Assemblyman Bob Auth is our guest. Assemblyman, I want to thank you for being here. You're a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. Godspeed to you, sir. Thanks for staying up late with us.
Thank you for having me, Rich.
You got it, brother. Talk to you soon. Folks, there's more to come straight ahead. It's live and it's national. Open phones across America is coming up now. Get your calls in now. 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. Don't go anywhere. Coming right back.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Your liberty-loving Latino amigo, happy to be here with you on this Tuesday evening. We're back from our little break for Labor Day, and there's no shortage of news, right? I mean, there's not a ton of Washington news because they don't come back for a couple of days in Washington, and it's a nice break when you don't have to hear from the politicians, and you get to look at some of the rest of the things that are happening in the world. And one of the stories that's caught my eye tonight was this one. The man that has called 911 on himself. Apparently, he's a drunk driver that dialed 911 to rat himself out. Listen to this audio. It's amazing.
911, where's your emergency?
I'm on Highway 77 going north, and there's somebody that is on the wrong side of the road.
And then did you see what color or type of vehicle it was?
No, he had his brights on, man. He almost ran me off the road.
Which direction is he in? North or south?
I am going northbound on 77. He was going southbound. I am on the east lane. He was on the west lane.
Okay. Could you tell if it was a car, truck, or SUV or anything?
It looked like a truck.
Okay.
But dude, he almost hit me, so I was like, holy
There you go. Now, this is a suspected drunken driver who accidentally called Nebraska law enforcement on himself, leading to his arrest. Again, this is a piece in CNN. And what's fascinating here is he was the one that was on the wrong side of the road. You can't make this up. The man called 911 to report another driver who he thought was driving on the wrong side of the road. According to a Facebook post from the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office, the Sheriff's Office on Thursday released the video of the incident, which actually happened in March, along with the audio of the 911 call and 911, excuse me. And when authorities arrived, it became clear to the caller himself that he was on the wrong side of the road as he was intoxicated. Of course, you heard him say, "I'm on Highway 77." And you got to just think, how messed up do you have to be? Well, the driver had a blood alcohol content limit number that was twice the legal limit, and that's according to the sheriff's office. Thankfully, they were able to arrest the guy before anybody was seriously hurt. But just imagine that, right? You're just sauced and tossed, hammered out of your mind. And again, who drives like that, right? You know, if I'm drinking, how far are you that you know, if you're like at a wedding or something, you're usually close to the hotel. If you're going out with your friends, take an Uber. It's really not that hard, right? You Lyft, Uber, there's so many different rideshare apps. I think everybody has that one sober friend who doesn't really drink anyway. I mean, just figure out how to carpool. It's 2023. Like, we know so much better right now, right? I can't believe this happened, but it's not the only incident. I mean, somebody took a page out of the playbook of being safe and decided, you know what, if I am going to get drunk, I'm going to have somebody sober drive. The problem with this particular story is that the driver had his 10-year-old driving. So this 10-year-old in Arizona was caught speeding in the car as his father sat in the passenger seat drunk. That's according to a police report. This Arizona dad was arrested after he was found in the passenger seat of his vehicle with his 10-year-old son driving and speeding. His name, Alvaro Obando Alvarez, 49 years old. He was charged with aggravated DUI, child abuse, and child endangerment, according to the Fox affiliate in Phoenix. He was also charged with possession of an open container of alcohol and unlawfully permitting a minor to drive. How about that? He was booked into jail. And again, his kid was speeding. I listen, nobody ever let me drive at that age. I can't imagine how. I mean, I guess when you're sauced, tossed, and out of your mind, you can pretty much come up with anything. But if you have a crazy story about, you know, anything like this, you can change your name if you want. I just want to hear the crazy stories, because it's never occurred to me to ask my 10-year-old to say, "Hey, listen, just take over. Just press the gas, keep the wheel straight. You know what to do, kid." I'm going to be over here finishing my six-pack. Absolute insanity. Folks, I want to get to your calls on this topic and everything else we've discussed tonight. Obviously, we've talked about the BRICS coalition. We've talked about immigration. And we've talked about the economy and the jobs report and so much more. So I want to get into all of that stuff with you guys. The phone number, 833-482-5337. And I want to start with... let's see here. Cumberland, Maryland, WCBC. Let's go to Frank. Frank, you're on with Rich Valdez. Welcome.
Does the BRICS money already exist? And if it does, what's to prevent Americans from getting the BRICS money and using that instead of dollars? Because apparently it's much safer, and it won't inflate because it's not fiat money.
Great point. It does not exist yet. They're in talks to build this coalition, and right now they're just trying to pool their resources to have enough of, I guess, a real rival to the G20 nations, and eventually, more power to go up against the G7. And they want, the rumor is that they're trying to create multiple currencies. So while they're a coalition and they're, pooling influence, I don't believe that they have come up with a plan to create one type of digital currency. There's some sort of crypto that's backed by precious metals, which is what the speculation is. It doesn't exist yet, and many say it may never exist because it would be very difficult to get China on board with everybody else having their own type of thing, that China would want to kind of run the show here and say, hey, we've created this thing and we're going to allow you guys to partner with us. So it won't be kind of like the dollar, but that's the goal, and for many that's the fear, right? The trepidation comes from exactly that if you have this thing where they can try to replace the world currency. And again, we discussed this last week, where there was some period of time where the British pound replaced the dollar, and then the dollar came back and whatnot as the world's reserve currency. So people were trading in pounds, and it's not unprecedented for the dollar to be replaced as the world reserve currency. However, I feel that's a huge black eye, and I agree with you. If that's the case, then people are going to say, listen, I want that thing, right? And this is why so many people like Bitcoin. So I think it's a conversation that the United States has to have, where we say, you know what, if we're constantly under threat from these BRICS nations, whether they're trying to entice partners of America or partners internationally to say, look, you guys have been dealing with the dollar forever. You know the dollar is fiat. It doesn't hold its value. There's a ton of inflation. These people don't know what they're doing. We've got this thing that we're working on, and you should roll with us. I think more and more, especially small nations, are going to be on board with Brazil and Russia and India and China, South Africa, etc. Because I think it makes sense, right? Who doesn't want the safest bet? And I think that's why the United States really has to take a strong look and go back to a gold standard, so that we'll strengthen the dollar and, again, reposition ourselves as the leaders in the global marketplace, in particular with our monetary ability and the world reserve currency. I just don't know that that's going to come out of this particular administration. And as long as they continue to lollygag and not figure out what they're not figuring out, we're going to be in a really tough spot. But I agree with you, Frank. It makes like the most sense in the world for us to get behind something like that, not behind BRICS, but behind a return to our own gold standard to position ourselves as the global leader once again.
The big question is, would the U.S. government permit it? Because there's a rumor that Gaddafi in Libya and Saddam Hussein in Iraq were taken out by the U.S. government simply because they were trying to pull something like that.
Excellent point. And I've heard that as well. I have no proof to the contrary or in favor of it, but I can say it would be a threat to the United States if you were doing something like this. The nations that are in BRICS are obviously way too big for us to go and start assassinating leaders. So I think there's a legitimate cause for concern. But for me, it's really a cause for a conversation. Again, America's still the big guy on the block, and if they played their cards right, i.e. the Biden administration, we'd be in way better shape, right? Control inflation, don't go into inflation, switch back to a gold standard. I think if Biden did those things, he'd be reelected in a landslide. The problem is he just seems to not want to entertain any of that. Now, I think there's a lot on the Republican side that would love a return back to the gold standard or some sort of gold standard, even if it's not the one that we had prior to 1969, but something where there's precious metals backing it and it's a finite resource that maintains value. I think that would be wondrous for our economy, and it would solidify us. I just don't know if it's going to happen. And I agree with you. If somebody's negotiating for the United States to secretly join BRICS but not be a public part of BRICS, I would think that is problematic, to say the least. I agree with you. I don't know if it would qualify as treason, but it would definitely qualify as extremely stupid and anti-American, in my opinion, If you disagree with me, feel free to give us a call, 833-482-5337. Thanks, Frank. I appreciate it. Big shout out to everybody on WCBC. And folks, we're going to get to the rest of your calls straight ahead. We got calls from Pennsylvania, Michigan, Maine, and more coming in right now. New York City. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Voted best head of hair in live late night radio 6 years in a row. It's Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. So in addition to the guy that called the cops on himself for driving on the wrong side of the road because he was hammered, he was drunk out of his mind, and eventually admitted, yeah, it was me, and got arrested. You got the dad who had his 10-year-old son driving the car while he was finishing off his drink in the passenger seat. Well, now get this one. You've got bars in Greece are collecting unfinished drinks and selling them back to other tourists, according to officials. Several bars in a popular Greek party town were shut down for collecting unfinished drinks and selling them back to other tourists. Unreal. Bars in Kavos on the island of Corfu in Greece were recently raided by the Independent Public Revenue Authority, whose agents suspected the establishment of tax evasion and selling alcohol that had been smuggled or tampered with. The operation was carried out by the AADE, tax and customs auditors, and local police officers last week, and the authorities visited the party area of the town to check if the establishments there had formally issued a register of their transactions to see if the alcohol was served and clean according to their laws. They found that 26 catering businesses did not issue 40,000 receipts valuing almost $300K. But what they worried about more for tourists was the agents discovered 7 catering establishments were serving drinks that did not have lot number markings, likely meaning the drinks were smuggled or illegal and possibly adulterated. Ooh, tampering with the drinks. Well, 8 samples from these bars were taken and sent to the county sheriff's office, or the county's state general chemistry office, to be tested. And this is interesting. The local bars explain that it's these local establishments and bartenders who are collecting unfinished drinks in canisters, and they save them in barrels to be served again to other customers as shots. Unreal. I've never heard of such a thing. I've heard of like filling the name brand whiskey with some off-brand whiskey and, trying to pass it off. But I've never heard of this. Anyway, these businesses have been closed for 48 hours as part of their punishment, and they were fined. And again, this is part of this investigation that they put into this. So, again, if you ever worked at a bar and you got a story like this, I'd love to hear it. Plus, we're going to get to your calls on everything else. Let's hit the phones on this one. Let's go to, let's see, where were we? Let us go to, who is it here? Next one up, Tom, Washington, Pennsylvania, listening on KDKA. Go right ahead.
Hello, sir. I'm actually in New Eagle, PA, Washington County. Have you ever heard of the place?
I haven't, but I'm glad that you're joining the program. And let me ask you, have you ever heard of this collecting used drinks, like half consumed shots and being recycled to be sold to more people?
Well, I'm sure I'm an ex-practical nurse from Pittsburgh. I'm sure that's a health hazard in some way, but I don't drink. I don't touch a drop of it. You talk about the local police. They just went past the house, but they can't suppress my voice, right? My First Amendment of speech. But, you know, my friend's a CI for the Regional Police Confidential Informant, and here they said, and down to the, you know, on a Bearcat scanner, the Pittsburgh Police's call letters are KGB, like the German police.
Yeah, papers, please, papers. And you know, Tom, it's an interesting thing when you have that level. I think so many of us support law enforcement, and we never want to see you know, people ridicule or insult the police. But sometimes you get these crazy stories that come out of there, and you know they try to get the bad apple to spoil the bunch. And lamentably, it's one of those things where you never want that to be the standard. But what's a cop to do, right? You got to do your job. And cops, let's just say they're pulling over this person who is a dad and has their 10-year-old in the driver's seat. It just makes you think, man, this is a tough situation. Obviously, they have to do what's right to protect the kid, to protect the public. So always kudos to the cops, but every now and again they do get a bad rap, and sometimes deservedly so. And when it is, we got to call it out as such. Tom, thanks for your call. I appreciate it. Let's go to Jennifer. She's in McKenzie, Tennessee on WCMT. Jennifer, what do you think about this kid who's 10 years old? He's driving his drunk dad around.
I wanted to tell you that my parents, they were not drunks, insisted that we learn to drive a car. I was 10, my brother was 8, stick shift, in case they needed help of some kind. Get to a doctor, get to the fire station, something like that. And
was
so
that in Tennessee as well, or where were you growing up?
No, I grew up in Illinois, a suburb of Chicago.
Okay.
And that's
well, yeah. Look, I get teaching your kids to drive early. That part makes a ton of sense to me. You know, a lot of people who have rural property. My family has a farm up in Pennsylvania, and it's 13 acres. So, you know, my niece has been driving for quite a while on the property, but never the designated driver for my brother or anybody in the family because, you know, we were sauced and tossed. But Jennifer, kudos to you for starting being on the road young. I think that's it's a testament to one's character, and it's a testament to parenting, I think, done the right way. Teach your kids to do the right thing, and just make sure you do it safely, right? Teach them how to do dangerous things carefully. Anyway, Jennifer, thank you for your call. Big shout out to McKenzie, Tennessee, WCMT. Your calls and more coming up straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
I want to listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. And there's a clip that I saw on social media over the weekend. It's an older clip, but it's relevant as ever. And this young Asian man is speaking with a news reporter, and there's some, you know, funny music in the background, but listen to what he says about the Chinese credit score system. And again, this is part of what the ESG movement is all about, of bringing a very similar system to the United States where corporations are given a score. And it's my opinion that once that becomes normalized, people will soon be given a score. And may be limited if the government has this type of power, especially if they bring in what they call a CBDC, a central bank digital currency, where they can say, well, look, you know, you haven't really, you've overdid your flights this year. You've been to too many cities, and your carbon footprint has exceeded what the government feels you should have. Therefore, you're not going to be allowed to fly anymore. You're going to have to figure out a different way to get to where you want to get, maybe an electric train, or, you know, you can only buy an electric car, and we're going to outlaw gas stoves, and then we're going to outlaw gas cars, and we're going to outlaw gas everything. And it's a very slippery slope where whatever happened to the free market, the free economy, liberty, where did all that go? Listen to this.
is a social credit score system. If you go to China, they're piloting it a few years ago in Shenzhen. So I lived overseas. If you go to Shenzhen, back in 2017, they already had facial recognition cameras there. So if you jaywalked in Shenzhen, they would immediately detect that and send you a notification, and they would deduct money from your what they call WeChat account. They use two main apps, WeChat and Alipay. So you can actually deduct your money directly from your account. This is 4 years ago, so this is not like some sort of conspiracy theory. It's not something that's going to happen 10 years into the future. This happened pre-corona in China. And so this system in China that exists is extremely advanced. They can detect if it's a man or a woman. They can guess your age. They can detect what kind of car model it is, who the manufacturer is. This is a sort of technology that we see in all these dystopian sort of films and whatever. And people keep putting it off and thinking that this is something that's going to happen later in my kid's lifetime or my grandkids. It's already here. And if this gets implemented anywhere, especially in a Western nation, it's not going away. And they're going to ask if you're gay. They're going to be asking if you ate 3 pizzas this week because it's unhealthy. If you buy certain books in certain countries, your country doesn't like you will lose points in the social credit score system. So this is already the reality of the world in certain places.
This is the reality of the world in certain places, and it might become the reality in the United States, lest we wake up and smell the coffee and the espresso and the café con leche while you're at it, and really, hold people accountable. And if we can't hold them accountable, we have to replace them at the ballot box, because this is something that would be detrimental for the free market system that we have, for the liberty that we're afforded by God and enumerated in our Constitution. And it's a scary prospect, and I feel like we're edging closer to it every day. And some people love it because it's done in the name of climate change, climate protection, whatever you want to call it. And China's led the way on this, and China leads the way on a lot of things. I'm looking at this piece here in the New York Post. Chinese nationals have snuck onto sensitive U.S. sites at least 100 times. This is sparking fears of spying. This is according to a report. Listen to that. 100 times in recent years, Chinese spies or Chinese nationals have snuck onto U.S. military bases, posing as tourists or whatever and whatnot. Some of the most alarming cases include crossing into the United States into a missile range in New Mexico, and scuba divers swimming near a rocket launch site near Cape Canaveral Kennedy Space Center in Florida. And some have used drones to take detailed aerial footage of sensitive military sites. Of course, we know about the famous weather balloon, quote-unquote weather balloon, and the Pentagon has confirmed cases of people speeding through security checkpoints. So what's going on? If we know it's happening, why aren't we paying better attention to this? What is happening? Because so many of these would-be intruders claim to be confused tourists. They're like, oh, I didn't know. I'm sorry. Don't speak English, right? They don't say it like that. But that's how my dad would have said it. But I think this whole thing is out of control. And, they stay at bases that have hotels on them. They could stay in the hotel to have more access, to be closer. So clearly it's something we know about because the New York Post is reporting on it. Why aren't we taking action? Right? Why are we allowing such a thing to happen? And I guess the argument is such a thing a bad thing? If someone is a Chinese national, should they be precluded from being in these areas? I would say, oh, hell yeah, we should keep them away at all costs, because you never know where their loyalty lies, and on paper, it doesn't belong to the United States. So I want to get your thoughts on that, as well as anything else we've discussed tonight. Let's go to Kim. She's in Shields, Michigan. Kim, listening on KDKA Online. Go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez. Welcome.
Hi, Rich. Thank you. The first thing I'd like to say is I don't know how that 10-year-old kid saw over the steering wheel, unless he was standing in the seat or something, because I have trouble seeing over the steering wheel because I'm really short.
I don't know how tall this kid was, but it is a crazy story. Now, what do you think about these Chinese tourists that are ending up on bases, crossing security checkpoints, quote-unquote, accidentally, posing as tourists?
I think they were doing exactly what we thought they were doing. They were spying. And they could play all that no speak English stuff. if Chinese nationals go onto a base or race like they raced through a gate, and I think some got shot. I think there were 3 of them in a car. It's spying. But what I called about was what EJ was talking about.
Oh,
about
yes.
The BLS changing the Bureau of Labor Statistics, changing the jobs numbers every month,
after the
6
fact.
months in a row. Yeah. The Biden-Freak Show administration didn't think this up on their own because they don't have an original idea. They got this from the Obama administration. They were doing stuff. If I remember right, it's been a long time, but I think they were doing this every month too. They'd come out with these good numbers and then they wouldn't even release it. It would come out through some economic group that looked into it, but it's tinkering with the numbers to make themselves look good. And like EJ said, what's the statistical odds of 6 months in a row, the numbers, like they put out, 187,000 new jobs. Then a couple months later, it comes out that it was less than 100,000. What's the odds of that happening 6 months in a row? And the other thing I wanted to talk about related to this is I think once a Republican a conservative gets back in the White House, we need to do the latest census over again because they took more than a year and a half to come out with the final numbers. It started during President Trump's administration, and then everybody's saying, where's the census numbers? I bet you they tinkered with that too. Well, I mean, throw an extra 100,000 people in Detroit and take away 1,000 from Shields. You know what I mean? It'd be so easy to do,
Right. Well, Kim,
Rich?
as far as with the Obama administration, I know that the director of the Office of Management and Budget, Mick Mulvaney, he had made some similar claims saying that the Obama administration had done that in years prior, the adjustment of these numbers after the fact that they were reported. However, they were never able to come up with any proof. But all that being said, we know what's happening with the Biden administration. We've heard how they're cooking the books, so to speak. And it's absolute crazy. And it makes sense when you talk to people and everybody's talking about how, they're not doing great. You got a handful of people that might be getting promotions at work, maybe a little more, getting a better job. But it's a small percentage, at least from my anecdotal experiences. The majority of people are just having to, trudge through this. And that's where we are. So I think you're right that they should not be adjusting these numbers after the fact. That sounds like a scam to me, right? It sounds like you're promising people one thing and it's totally something else. So I think you're spot on in so much as your analysis on that being problematic. Absolutely. What's the probability? I think something our guest, economist E.J. Antoni, mentioned was that it wasn't statistically probable when he looked at it. So I take his word for it, and I think not good at all, no bueno. Thank you, Kim in Shields, Michigan, for the call. We're coming to the rest of your calls straight ahead. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
So the leader of the Proud Boys, Enrique Tarrio, black Cuban guy, who's the leader of this white supremacist group, He was sentenced to 22 years over his involvement in the January 6th riot. The problem was Tarrio was not even in D.C. at the time of the riot. I think he'd been arrested the day before. But Enrique Tarrio, known as the chairman of the Proud Boys, sentenced to 22 years in jail over seditious conspiracy in connection to the riot at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. This is now the longest sentence handed down to any January 6th defendant. Now, prosecutors were trying to get Tarrio sentenced to 33 years in federal prison. Tarrio's co-defendants, Zachary Rell, Joe Biggs, and Ethan Nordine, all of whom were Proud Boy affiliates, all received anywhere between 15 and 18 years in prison. Pretty scary stuff. Absolute insanity. It's just scary to me that this is happening when this guy wasn't even there, right? So I guess they're going to see he's the ringleader. He caused this to happen, just like they're doing to Trump, because he was, did you go to the Capitol? I did not go to the. Oh, well, then it's your fault. Unbelievable. Anyway, let's hit the phones and get your opinions on this. Let's go to Allison in Portland, Maine, WLOB. Go right ahead.
Hi, Ola. I was just going to talk about that. This is pretty much a rhetorical question, but how many, what's happened with the Proud Boys people, and I'm not a fan of the Proud Boys. I don't know much about them. I get the feeling they wouldn't like me much, but that's irrelevant. A lot of people there, not just the Proud Boys, have been getting these insane sentences. And so how many people who were the leaders of Antifa and Black Lives Matter and the organizer of those riots 3 years ago and the participants of those riots 3 years ago, how many of them have gotten really serious prosecution and heavy sentences? Do you know of any?
Well, I forget his name right now, but he was the leader of the Oath Keepers. He got a crazy sentence as well for being convicted of seditious conspiracy. I don't think he got this long of a sentence because this seems to be the longest one. But he was there, at least on the premises. And I'm not saying he did it or that I support that he's in prison or anything like that. I'm just saying at least the one guy that they charged was there. And he got 18 years. The guy that they charged today wasn't even there. And I understand that they were, at a hotel not too far from D.C., I think in Arlington or some other, close to D.C. area, and had, some guns with them and whatnot. And again, lots of people travel with guns. There's a whole way to travel with guns that's totally lawful and legal. But some people maybe, didn't do that. I don't remember all the details of it, but I can tell you, I think this is extraordinarily excessive, right? I mean, how does this happen when you're not even in town and you get and again, if they could prove that, and I guess they did in court because they had a very favorable jury pool, this is what you get. This is the result. A guy that wasn't even there was arrested the day before and for grabbing a LGBTQ or a BLM flag off of a church, and he wasn't even there. And he's got 22 years. Pretty hefty, in my opinion, Allison.
But I just wanted to bring up something I've been wanting to bring up because the crime situation is getting really bad across the country. Anyway, I used to live in L.A., and I've got a good friend there who's been there her whole life. I've known her for 40 years. And she's not in the best neighborhood in L.A., who is, except for super rich people. But she's not in a terrible neighborhood either. And there was a murder right across the street from her place, from her condo. And it's something to do with drugs that hasn't quite been figured out yet, and they haven't, solved it or anything. And it's getting really bad. I mean, she tells me and she's a pretty tough chick, but she's changing a bit the way she dresses at night and, and where she goes. She knows L.A. like crazy.
Well, I'll tell you, I think we see a lot of these changes just in general with what's going on with the economy is changing people, with what's going on with the political, I'm going to call it persecution, where people feel like, I'm going to go to a protest. No, can't go to a protest. No, got to take this off. They might police my speech. I mean, we're seeing it happen in real time, and it's a relatively new concept for so many of us. Thank you, Allison, for your call. I appreciate it. Big shout out to WLOB and everybody in Portland, Maine. And folks, we're coming back. We're going to wrap this thing up. We got a couple more calls that I want to get through before we do. The number 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, we continue checking in with you guys straight across America. We go to Butte, Montana, KXTL. Let's go to Mary. Mary, you're on with Rich Valdez.
Hey, Rich. I just was referring to the caller before about the Proud Boys, and I just wanted to let them know that the last one that got, I think, 17 years was in the military. He was in the Marines, and he got hurt by an explosion or something and got head trauma of some sort. And these Proud Boys are all actually guys that just love America. And it was crazy how one just shook a fence and he got 17 years. And nobody mentions who these people are. But these people are military, and I just wanted to mention that. They're not bad people.
Right, yeah, and I would think when you're arresting the leader of the Proud Boys and giving him 22 years and a handful of other guys, when the idea is that they were there en masse, that there was a whole bunch of them, and only a handful of them are getting prosecuted, tells me that this is either the government overreaching or a couple of bad apples that isn't spoiling the bunch. Now again, I don't know Mr. Tario. I believe he's worked as an FBI informant, and he had to do lots of things. But again, I don't know the full details of the story. But I do know he wasn't there. That part I know. That part's been admitted, and that part I think is crazy, that you could go to jail for seditious conspiracy and not be there. And of course, somebody's going to say, "Well, Rich, how slow are you that you don't realize that conspiracy is exactly that? You don't have to be there. You get people to do it." I do understand the definition of conspiracy. I think it's a real stretch on behalf of the government to charge this guy that way. My thoughts. Mary, thank you for your call. Big shout out to Butte, Montana, KXTL. Let us go to Daryl in Hawley, Minnesota on WDAY in Fargo. Daryl, go right ahead very quickly, sir.
Yeah, I got a poem for you. It only takes 10 seconds. It goes like this. They walked together, for it was quite late.
Mm-hmm.
She stopped and waited as he opened the gate. She wanted to thank him, but she didn't know how, because he was the farmer and she was the cow.
That's good. Nothing like a little humor to break up the monotony. I appreciate that, Daryl. And I guess I don't have time to do a follow-up with you, but I appreciate the call. Big shout out to you and everybody in Hawley, Minnesota, listening on WDAY out of Fargo. Much appreciated. And everybody that called in tonight, I appreciate it. We're going to do this again tomorrow with all the hot news stories of the day, so make sure you don't miss it. And tune in on social media to see who the guests are going to be. I'll tweet that out tomorrow. Folks, hasta la próxima. Take care, good night, and God bless. I am Rich Valdez.